do is get started. So my name's Susanna, I'm a marketing coordinator at Nelson Secondary. I'm just going to kickstart with an acknowledgement of country, and we'll also go through a little bit of housekeeping. And then I'll pass on to Claire so she can start tonight's session. So first, if it would let me click next slide. We just want to start with an acknowledgement of country. So we formally do this acknowledgement to show our awareness of, while providing our respects to the traditional custodians. We gather today physically dispersed but virtually connected. In the spirit of reconciliation, Cengage acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and we extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. And just for a little bit of housekeeping, just a reminder, this webinar is recorded and the recordings and slides will be emailed out to all who have registered next week. So that way, if you have a link or something that you've missed that you want to go back to, you can always catch up later. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A. That way we won't miss them during the designated question time. But if you have any comments or have anything you'd like to share, you can use the chat that's open. We have samples, demos and Nelson MindTap trials for Fit for Life currently. So if you're interested, the link should be in the chat soon. And you can follow those links just to sign up. And if you have any other questions about the session or anything spoken about today, you can contact us at os.secondary@cengage.com. And now I'm just going to pass over to Kathy, who's going to introduce Claire for you all. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy. I work with the portfolio team here at Nelson Cengage. So thanks for joining us tonight. I know it's getting towards the busy end of the year, so we do appreciate it. Look, it's my pleasure to introduce Claire. This is our second webinar with Claire. Claire's also spoken about mental health and getting across how we teach that to our sort of junior secondary students. Today we're talking about consent, as you know, and I'm not quite sure how, but as well as finding time to co-author for the Fit for Life series, Claire lectures at Deakin University in health education, student wellbeing and sexuality education. She's also currently studying to gain her PhD. I don't know when she finds time to sleep. Claire's worked in many sectors of the community and has experience writing curriculum and educating children, young people and professionals across the board. Her areas of interest include parents as sexuality educators of their children, capacity building and sexuality education, respectful relationships education in school and elite sports, and helping young people open up conversations about mental health and sexuality as well. So it's an absolute pleasure to have Claire join us again tonight. So handing straight over to you, Claire.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I really appreciate that. Hello, everyone, and welcome today. Thank you so much for joining us. If we just pop to the next slide, Susanna, for me, please. So what we're going to look at today is just briefly changes in the Australian curriculum in terms of sexuality education and consent, respectful relationships. Look at the evidence around teaching contemporary sexuality education. We'll look at some current updates and finish with some examples for the Fit for Life series. I'd firstly like to provide a trigger warning and state up front that we will be discussing gender-based violence in relation to sexuality education. So if anyone has or needs to step out or has any concerns, please put them in the chat, or you can speak to us afterwards. I'd like to follow up if you are having any difficulties. Today, I might get you to go on to the next one. Thanks, Susanna. Before we go on to this, I just want to talk about upfront about consent, because it's really fraught with really complex notions of gender and power. Historically, discourses of consent allowed young women very little agency, and therefore they were required to restrict access to their bodies by them being the gatekeepers, so them being the ones who say yes or no to any sexual activity. This way, it situated women as responsible for young men's sexual behaviours. So teaching consent then is very difficult, because we have to overcome those entrenched ideas about gender. And this can be really difficult also for young men, because they have to consider their sort of complicity and privilege in maintaining these gendered inequalities. On reflection, most young people don't actually remember schools or parents doing sexual consent very well or teaching them very well. These young people report going into the internet or media sources or friends to learn more in depth about it. So that is worrying for us as educators. When consent is taught early on in schooling, students have much higher confidence in later life relationships, and they're also a lot more confident navigating unwanted sexual contact in those relationships. In addition, these early experiences of consent education, even outside sexuality education, can actually prepare students for the more nuanced sexual body consent that they will come in contact with later on in life. Now, our watch has had has played a significant part in the respectful relationships education across the last sort of 10 years. We're just going to have a quick look at this little clip on evidence-based respectful relationships education in schools. Thanks, Susanna. Let me get my words back.
Of gender-based violence is a story with no happy ending. But what if we could change this story? To do that, we must go back to the beginning and talk about our schools and respectful relationships education. Unfortunately, inequality and disrespect towards girls and young women can happen in our schools. And when this happens, it impacts not only on individual students, but also contributes to a culture and the school community and broader society where men and women, boys and girls are not seen as equal. Schools are where we see gender stereotypes reinforced or challenged. They have significant influence over how students see themselves and their place in the world. When teachers and other students put boys, girls, and young people in separate boxes because of assumptions based on their gender, race, or ability, we reinforce stereotypes of what it is to be a boy or girl, man or woman. When disrespectful behavior is excused or justified and students are not held accountable for their actions, we accept behavior that can ultimately lead to gender-based violence. This and other sexist, racist, and transphobic attitudes must be challenged and will not be tolerated in our schools. It's up to us to change this story now, once and for all. This work requires a whole of school approach, and everyone has a role to play. When schools deliver respectful relationship materials that support students to understand and critically analyze what it means to be a boy or a girl, we are changing the story. When teachers use opportunities across a range of subjects to actively promote gender equality and challenge gender stereotypes, we are changing the story. When schools work in partnership with families and members of the school community to take action for gender equality, we are changing the story. When we create policies to encourage and actively promote female leadership, such as job share roles, and when staff are supported by school leaders to understand what gender-based violence looks like at school and how to prevent it, we are changing the story. One action alone won't be enough. We need multiple activities across all areas of the school community, engaging staff, students, and families, and supported and enabled by governments to contribute to preventing gender-based violence. If we make the narrative in our schools about gender equality, inclusivity, and respect towards women and girls, the story our next generations will tell will be different. Everyone has a role to play, and together we can tell a story where girls and boys have equal power, value, and opportunities, regardless of gender, race, religion, ability, background, and sexuality. Most importantly, a story where gender-based violence is no longer in the picture, because ending violence against women starts with gender equality.
Thanks, Susanna. We'll go to the next slide when you're ready. So I think that just highlights the real importance of a whole school approach, that it's not just education, not just us as teachers teaching our students. It's school is a workplace as well. So we've got we've got teachers and staff, leadership team, and then we've got the parents and community outside that we also need to be aware of. So in ACARA, with the new version 9 curriculum set for implementation in 23, aims to ensure that students receive more explicit education on positive and respectful relationships and consent. So this curriculum reflects an incredible sort of political commitment to respectful relationships education, along with community support, which is prioritising women's safety in Australia. This has been highlighted in many recent examples, such as the Teach Us Consent campaign by victim survivor advocate Chanel Contos, along with others such as Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins. These conversations have really moved community attitudes to a place where, you know, the curriculum needed to be changed to be addressing these issues with young people explicitly. We're going to go through just the ACARA, the version 9, but just really quickly, because I'm sure you're all aware of you know, the changes. But the substrands there they're similar. They've just been simplified. However, they still address the self, others, and community that we have always spoken about. And respectful relationship falls into all of those areas. Thanks, Susanna. Consent now is also front and centre in the description in the focus area, again to make it explicit. Thanks, Susanna. So these descriptors now contained explicit consent statements, whereas previously these were found in the elaborations. So they've been moved up to ensure that they are taught. They're no longer examples to use. So the use of permission is possibly to appease, you know, detractors being concerned that sexual consent is being taught at the F to 4 levels prior to puberty. We've always had real problems with people being very concerned about what's being taught at those really young levels. Thanks. I'd just like to talk about where research in sexuality education is moving to and how contemporary resources are now being written to reflect this. It is such a new, not new, but it's an exciting space at the moment because of the impetus to include this consent education. We totally understand it's not an easy thing to do. But where there's support across the country for respectful relationships education, we're really seeing some really important changes happening, positive changes. So in doing so, here in Australia, we're actually leading the way in the world in strengthening positive, equal and respectful relationships between school students and also the wider school community as part of a whole school approach. Prior to this mandate, schools have been implementing and delivering sexuality education, including respectful relationships, for decades, but all in differing ways. This results in inconsistencies in student learning outcomes across Australia. So this is hopefully going to bring us together and have a more consistent approach across the country. Some of these things that I'm going to talk about are expected and fairly straightforward for you, but I'm going to address a couple of them that may need some further explanation. So I'm going to talk about gender transformative approaches and what that is. The gendered nature of both domestic and family and sexual violence, and also the patterns of perpetration and victimisation, are reflected in attitudes which have to be addressed if we want to have any impact. So educational strategies have to challenge those gendered stereotypes that reinforce gender-based violence. Promuto et al. Says this best, that gender transformative practices seek to transform gender relations through critical reflection and the questioning of individual attitudes, institutional practices, and broader social norms that create and reinforce gender inequalities and vulnerabilities. And we can't do that without having those types of conversations in the classroom. So therefore, teachers have to be able to speak about these and allow students to have those conversations. One of our challenges, I guess, is to provide that educative experience that is inclusive of all genders and also sexualities. Next is I'm going to talk about is the sexual ethics informed approach, which might be something that's newish to people. The United Nations have always stated that young people have the basic right to a sexuality education. This ethical approach that we're currently taking in sexuality education has been taken from Moira Carmody's sexual ethics framework. And it actually involves 4 key elements. These elements are care of self, care of others, negotiation, and reflection. Educative experiences about relationships have to involve questions about what the young person wants. So their care of themselves. Am I doing what I want to do? Does this feel right for me? Then they have to consider the impact of their behaviours on others, so that care of others. They need to have the skills in negotiating about what we both want in the relationship. And then finally have a reflection or have those skills to reflect on what actually is occurring in real time. What was the experience? How did it make them feel? And possibly having got those conversations with their partner. To do this, young people must be able to have those conversations, must also have conversations about pleasure and desire, which are often left out of these conversations. This has often been called the missing discourse of desire, and these conversations can be really difficult for teachers to initiate and facilitate in classes because we're often under such extreme pressure from schools and parents, not to say the wrong thing. Student voice is another really important one that's sort of really advancing in the last sort of year. I'm going to talk about it a bit later, but I will say that there's increasing impetus to find out what students want in sexuality education experiences. So most often it's adults leading the conversations about what they think young people want. Research that is inclusive of children and young people is now the norm in this space, which is great to hear. Thanks, Susanna. So these are all evidence-based strategies that we promote for use in classroom settings, and they're probably all very obvious to you, and you're probably already doing all of them already. It's difficult when you do use a resource that, say, doesn't have relevant or clear imagery. So, you have to sort of seek out that. So any resource written for moving forward is going to include these, so you won't have to worry. I know it's hard to get things that are inclusive. Thanks, Susanna. So now I'm going to move on to student voice, and I'd like to play you this really recent clip of a school that puts student voice as a priority. In Victoria, respectful relationships education has been mandated for a few years now, and this group of Year 12 students themselves held a forum to try to understand what their student body thought about sexuality education.
Hi, my name's Sally and I'm a Year 12 student.
Hey, I'm Hannah. Hi, I'm Lucy.
Hello, I'm Mia.
I'm Kitty and I'm also a Year 12 student. We would just like to issue a quick trigger warning on this video as we will be mentioning sexual violence and rape.
This year, we've seen a groundbreaking display of actions against sexual violence. It is a fact that behavior like this stems from inadequate sexual education. The current Victorian curriculum, the Respectful Relations, became a core component of the curriculum in 2016 to teach students about healthy relationships, including consent. In May, we ran a forum led by students for students to see how effective our sexual education was. We talked to students about their experiences with sexual education and what they felt were missing. There was an overwhelming number of students who wanted to learn more about what consent is and isn't, and how to recognize abusive and coercive behaviors within relationships and interactions. But these are topics that teachers are not trained to teach, topics that require a dedicated and trained staff member who has the skills to have these conversations.
We found that there's an arguable need for respectful relationship educators. Across Victoria, over 1,400 schools have implemented this curriculum. But for those 1,400 schools who have carried out the respectful relationship program, there is only 34 support staff to assist in training and the implementation of this program. At our school, teachers have expressed their concern about teaching this curriculum, as they feel as if they do not possess the specific skills that are required to deliver this program. Heather Clark, manager of NCARS, has stated that the current support provided to teachers is simply inadequate, and went on to recommend on behalf of Sexual Assault Services Victoria that we need a respectful relationship educator positions in every school and funded prevention positions in sexual assault services to support teachers, young people and their parents to have these important conversations. Victoria has a groundbreaking program for sexual education, but it needs to be further improved. Both teachers and experts feel that there's not enough support and training for the respectful relationships curriculum to be implemented properly. Students in all schools need dedicated and trained staff to deliver that curriculum, as well as appropriate support available. Teachers in all schools need a dedicated and trained team to educate them on how to deliver that curriculum. All school communities need supportive, trained and intelligent people to educate us on this topic in order to stop that perpetuation of rape culture and disrespect. Because without teachers who are fully equipped to comprehensively provide sex education and answers to student questions like the ones raised in our forums, students turn to the media and the internet for this information. Statistically, children only get 16% of their information about sexual assault from the adults that they know. This means that 84% of their information about sexual assault comes from the internet and social media platforms, rife with misinformation and popular culture and blurred lines of sexual consent. And as students like us sought after valuable information on consent and sex and relationship and intimacy, It's likely that we come across pornography of which 88% contains physical aggression and 50% contains verbal aggression. This is a mass contributor to the prevalence of sexual violence and is the exact opposite of what we need. It was reported as early as 1986 that substantial exposure to sexually violent materials bears a causal relationship to antisocial acts of sexual violence and possibly to unlawful acts of sexual violence. More recent studies have also found that exposure to violent pornography increases amounts of real-life sexual violence. But as horrible and as confronting as these statistics are, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Researchers in a 2014 paper found that if improper beliefs and attitudes about sex were supplanted with acceptable ones, the potential for sexual assaults might be reduced. These improper beliefs can be supplanted through effective sexual education.
We want our teachers to be able to educate us about such important matters effectively. And when they can't, our teachers deserve to have someone they can turn to help them. Research shows that when students are poorly educated and misinformed, they struggle to identify what things like consent and abusive behaviour look like. As students, schools and universities, we need to come together as a part of the wider community to push for more dedicated and trained support staffers in every school to help our teachers. We need to work together to initiate this change to build a pathway to a better future where every student receives a proper sexual education from a trained and capable teacher who is willing to answer their questions. We need to raise awareness about the struggles our teachers face and the lack of support provided to them by writing to our local members of parliament to show them this is an issue we care about, that this is an issue we hold them accountable to address, and that we will not stop applying pressure until they do. Because with proper sexual education and a sound understanding of consent, the rates of sexual harassment and sexual assault in Victoria are likely to decrease.
I love that they're doing this work and off their own back as well. It's so sort of, it's great to see that sort of community engagement and that health promotion type work happening as well. But it's so wonderful that they're recognising how difficult it is and the challenges that teachers face in doing this type of work, and that they're pushing for better experiences for themselves, but also, for the teachers in asking for professional learning. It's so insightful. Thanks, Susanna. So in terms of young people's voice, there's been a really strong commitment to hearing from these young people across both sexuality and respectful relationships across Australia. I'm going to talk about a respectful relationships sort of inventory that's been happening. We're also in Victoria, we're also rewriting Catching On Early, which is the curriculum, and consultations and student research into student voices is taking place throughout both of those. So in terms of sexuality and gender inclusive, we have to, these are what students are telling us are what we need. So we need to include diversity in examples and activities when we're designing education. We've also got to consider transgender and intersex students' experiences of puberty, because they can be quite varied and quite confusing. Contraception choices for same-sex attracted young people are often left out of conversations, and they need to happen as well. The other question we often get asked is, do we split students up into male and female groups? Students are telling us no, that that's not something that they want to happen, particularly in the higher levels, because it doesn't acknowledge diversity, and they are wanting to hear both sides of the story. In terms of the metaphors and acronyms, young people are telling us that they don't work. They want things in plain language where they don't have to think about it or make some understanding or try to understand what is being said. They want it to be obvious. The milkshake commercial was a great example where, young people found it belittled them. It made them, it just wasn't targeted to them. So they want to hear about non-consensual actions. They need to be stated, not just referred to. And they also talked a bit about acronyms in schools aren't used consistently. So what is used in Year 7 is different to Year 9 or 10 or later even, that we need to take those out and just speak really plainly to students. The realistic and relevant examples, especially about consent, they were speaking about this mainly in the digital space, that it needs to be relevant and attuned to young people's experiences, what's really happening in their lives. So they identified this as an increased need due to COVID. So during the time of COVID lockdown particularly, and when people were unsure, relationships were being built and maintained and broken online. They're saying to us that this is still occurring. So it's something that's continuing, and that they need help and assistance in being able to keep safe, but also being able to have those relationships there. So when we have to combat the media untruths, so students identified books and pornography as having a really detrimental effect on students' information gathering. They identified books due to the outdated nature, and they don't often reflect their own experiences. And pornography, obviously, where those expectations of male and female sexual behaviours in relationships is not their lived experience. So if there's nowhere for them to speak about this, they're sort of left, and that's when they access internet sources and other sources that are questionable. They also wanted to be taught how to navigate situations. So examples of what they can do in tricky situations, how they can get out of tricky situations, or how they can help friends. So as health educators, we do that usually. We've got to make sure that we are in this area increasing the skill building so that they can go out and use those skills. But it's not just the knowledge and building understanding that they need. The anonymous questions, they say do. Just do it. It's something that gives them a space to ask and to be answered. A space to ask and be answered when there's nowhere else to go, or that they don't trust any other sources. Students have a high sort of, for teachers that they like, they really want to get that information from them. But just a tip, I heard someone say yesterday on the radio about they just pulled a question out of a question box and answered it straight away, and it was a very strange question. But my tip is always take the question box away, look at the questions, collate the similar ones, come up with a way to answer them as a group rather than read individual questions. Please make sure you've read them. Read them before you take them into class. The last thing you want to do is open an unread question in front of the class for obvious reasons. The last thing I want to talk about is parent involvement. My research is in parent teaching their kids about sexuality education, and all the research points to parents actually wanting to have those conversations with young people. But young people find challenges communicating with parents and carers. They find most topics are taboo and really uncomfortable, and they would like to have those casual conversations where they can bring up what they're learning in schools with their parents. So the young people's suggestions are that we need to find ways to educate and involve parents in this topic so that young people can be confident approaching them. Things have really changed in consent education since their parents learnt about it, if they ever did, particularly in the online space. So parents also recognise that they need education on how to talk to that young people about being safe, and schools can be that conduit between those. Thanks, Susanna. So I just want to talk about really quickly about some of the current initiatives that are going on in Australia. We have the Good Society, which is set up to address the needs of schools teaching sexuality education across Australia. After that milkshake commercial, the F to 10 curriculum, which was developed, is currently being reviewed by experts, and it's going to be rewritten to fit the Australian curriculum version 9. But there are, along with the curriculum, there's also multiple media resources linked to the curriculum, which makes it really interactive, and it can actually be moulded to the needs of the school and their learners. So that will be a resource available to everybody. Thanks, Susanna. We also have in Queensland, Queensland are using an evidence-based approach to develop resources. They've conducted, much research in schools, and they're developing curriculum resources to meet those requirements. Similarly to Western Australia, next one, thanks. Who are developing a whole school approach to respectful relationships. They've conducted pilot programs in schools, which finished this year, and evaluations are now taking place for them to be written. Thank you. And on the, I have to say up front that the Respectful Relationships National Inventory has recently been completed. I have to say up front that it has not been released yet, the documentation, but I've been working with the researchers, so I've been able to gain some access into their overarching recommendations that I'm just going to quickly touch on. The development of a resource bank per se, I guess, has found some great resources across Australia that have had an evaluation component that some resources have been really found to have an impact. Evaluation in the past has been a problem. It's been lacking, so it's been really difficult to assess any of the resources that we've had in place over the last 40 years. So the recommendations for the project are quite substantial and require really strong commitment from both or from government bodies, schools, organisations and academia. The first is to develop or to have government leadership to develop a quality assessment tool. This will help schools to pick and choose what is effective respectful relationships education for them. We need to ensure classroom ready respectful relationships education teachers. So looking at embedding that in pre-service teacher training. At the moment, we have 2 universities in the country who are teaching respectful relationships education in schools or sexuality education as a unit. So it's not enough. They're looking to, or recommending that we have an AQF level respectful relationships education course, credentials for teachers, and then mandating it as a requirement for teacher registration. We're looking at, or they want to look at, increasing the capacities of educators to teach respectful relationships, so not just the health education teachers, but across the board, and providing professional learning for that. Having an online professional learning resource hub where professional learning, guidance, evaluations, research reports, a repository of all the respectful relationships education resources that we have in the country. We also need to monitor, evaluate and continually improve respectful relationships education. And again, that evaluation is such an important part that has not been done sort of in the previous prior to 5 or 6 years ago. Or it hasn't been done on a state or a national level, state, territory, and national level. We also want a coordination mechanism for respectful relationships education, so how we can get communities involved, schools involved, government, and in terms of that, having a whole school approach to respectful relationships. So, development of resources, not just for teachers, but or students, but for engaging parents and guardians and carers, and, diversity in school contexts. So having different types of resources that we can use. And I think the last thing, which was something that one of the students mentioned, was a dedicated respectful relationships education role in all Australian schools. So that's sort of the recommendations that are out nationally, and hopefully we will see some changes over the next few years. Thanks, Susanna. So I just wanted to show you this. I'm not sure if anyone's seen this before, but there's some really wonderful work being done in schools, and I really applaud all of you who are taking the time and effort to be able to do this in schools for your students. This one is a clip about what young people are putting forward in terms of sort of a health promotion and looking in the substrand of making health and safe choices. So if we just have a look at this, thanks, Susanna, that'd be great. Have we got the sound on that?
Can you guys hear that? Yeah, it's working. Fabulous.
a future for a present. Women are the power, the OG, the start. Family, strength, love, we are the heart. Our culture is strong, respect one another. We are all family, no matter what color. All my ladies call it out for me. I said RESPECT. Our sisters want a man who lets us shine. Our sisters want a man who respects our line. Strong is not jealous, strong is not rough. Strong is being kind when the times are tough. We can't and we won't just let it be. Can't stop, won't stop till equality. I swear to break the silence. Sister girls, shine up, stop the violence. We gotta stand up and make a choice. We gotta speak up and be one voice. We gotta show respect and stop the violence. Together we can break the silence. So let's break the silence. Stop the violence. Let's break the silence. Stop the violence. Let's break the silence. Stop the violence. Stand up, speak up and sing it out loud. No room for abuse, verbal or physical. Gonna paint a picture to you to make it visual. Being a man is about being strong. Make right, just know right from wrong. I wanna be a leader and a good father. But the right message to all our brothers. So the next generation can hear us clear. So our mothers and sisters don't live in fear. To show how I feel, I wear a white ribbon. Violence against women, you gotta be kidding. It's trying to stand up and be the change. If you need some help, well, that can be arranged. Must speak up and break the silence. Like the change, and it's not violence. Come on, brother, man, it's our responsibility. Respecting one another and living with equality.
Now in culture, respect is very important. Respect your mommy will bring my blood as well. Respect your daddy, uncle, and all men know all about carrying the wisdom, knowledge, and respect moiety group, clan group, tribe, all about the ceremony, country, and dreaming. Respect all women from all the different culture in this world. Bro.
We gotta stand up and make a choice. We gotta speak up and be one voice. We gotta show respect and stop the violence. Together we can break the silence. So let's break the silence. Stop the violence. Let's break the silence. Stop the violence. Let's break the silence. Stop the violence. Stand up, speak up and sing it out loud. Stop the violence. Stop the violence.
Thanks, Susanna. I just think it's a great clip just to show it's young people with their elders, you know, having a voice and or being able to stand up for what they believe in. Next slide. I just want to leave you with a couple of scenarios that have been developed in consultation with researchers at Deakin University who are specifically working in the online consent space with young people. So these have been developed from student voice in regards to what young people are actually experiencing. And so these stories are based on real stories, real experiences of young people. I'll just let you have a read. So again, these scenarios are from student voices, amalgamation of a couple, you know, of what's happening across the board. So it's not just one person's story. We go to the next one. Thanks, Susanna. These scenarios are in the new edition of Fit for Life. And that's it for me. Thank you so much again for attending. And any questions you have, please send them through. Be happy to answer. Thanks, Susanna. I'm going to pass it over back to you.
Awesome. I'm just going to pass on to Donna, who's one of our learning consultants. She's going to take you through products, pricing and availability and all that fun stuff. So Donna, if you wanted to jump.
You just wanted to go on to the next
start here.
So I'm just going to thank you for having me today, coming to visit. We're going to just give a quick snapshot of the Nelson MindTap. And if you want to continue on, Susanna. So Nelson MindTap is learning that puts you at the centre. Next slide. As you can see from this infinity diagram, Nelson MindTap is an online learning space that puts the teacher and the students at the centre. Nelson MindTap is a flexible, tailored learning experience for both teachers and students, where content includes an immersive and interactive e-text, enriched with multimedia activities and a variety of assessments with real-time gradebook analytics, allowing for students and teachers to keep track of their learning growth. It's an engaging learning experience that can be accessed anytime, anywhere. And next slide. Nelson MindTap also allows course customization. You can create your own course based on school topic selection, sequence, and priorities. As a teacher, you can customize the course by changing the sequence of the module segments. You have the ability to hide content and reveal it when you're ready. You can add links to your own content and arrange within the learning pathway. When you're ready, you can publish your course. This allows you to create a personalised learner journey based on each student needs. And next one. The e-text can be viewed at grade level or modified level. This means the e-text can be viewed at a grammatically simplified version while still providing the high-level content. Read speaker text to speech technology caters for differing student ability and literacy levels. Students and teachers have the ability to access and personalise the e-text by using tools such as highlight, bookmarks. You can create notes and save into your study hub for later revision. Next one. This is a very powerful feature. It's the Nelson MindTap Gradebook. Assessments feed into the Gradebook with real-time usage and analytics. Students can track their own progress and learning with immediate feedback. You have pre- and post-section quizzes which provide formative assessment opportunities that you can assign to your students as classwork or homework. You can differentiate instruction by creating groups and assign to the whole class or a group of students or individually to students. With full admin access to your classes, you can easily create and edit groups. You can grade any non-auto marking assessment, and this will sync to your school's LMS. Next one. So just touch on pricing and availability. Access to the Nelson MindTap courseware for teachers is complimentary when you purchase a class set or booklist the book at your school. When you adopt the course, we work with you to help you set up, and then you can also invite students to the course using a course key. The Fit for Life is offered as a print and digital blend. So you have the student book plus your Nelson MindTap, which is at $70.95. The workbook is print only and available at $31.95. We also offer a value pack, which incorporates the student book, the workbook, as well as Nelson MindTap, and that's $82.95. Or you do have the option of Nelson MindTap digital only, and that's for 26 months at $49.95. As we stand today, the levels 7 and 8 student book and workbook will be available in November this year, as well as the student book for level 9 and 10. The workbook for level 9 and 10 will be available December this year. We offer full teacher training, and we'll be happy to arrange this before the books and before their books are adopted at the school. Next one. We'd like to invite you to participate in a trial of the Nelson MindTap courseware. We're currently offering a 60-day complimentary sample trial. We also have uncorrected page proofs available now. If you would like to see the page proofs or you would like to book a demo, please reach out to your learning consultant, or you can contact us on ost.secondary@cengage.com. Also, if you have anything you would like to discuss further or need some more clarification, you can contact Claire via this email address and we'll put you in touch. Thank you so much for your time today. Back to you, Susanna.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I think there are a couple of questions in the Q&A that we can go through. I'm just trying to read. So there is one just about the textbook in general. But is there any plan or functionality to align questions? I might pass those ones on to Kathy just because the platform functionality.
I can't see that question. Can you read that out for us?
Yep. So in the Q&A, so it says, generic question about the textbook, but is there any plan or functionality to align questions or standard responses, specifically with auto marking, to the SCSA judging standards, since that's what we have to use to assign grades?
Yeah, good question. So we are looking at ways that we can closer align the content and the assessment directly to different curriculum and content descriptors. So it's something we are working on in the background. So initial release will include teaching programs which will summarise any related assessment and reading, but there'll be a lot more in-depth approach to be released after that too.
Yeah, and then there is one more, and it says, in some conservative schools, if I could find my words, where certain students may not know what a nude is or content like that, will that be elaborated in the text?
I can answer that. Yes, it will. And you're right. There's many schools that don't have, or students won't have an idea. So it takes it right back to the basics. And then, teachers can actually use the text, as Donna has discussed, to talk about, where their students are at. They can use any part of it.
And I think that's all for questions in the Q&A. If you did have any, please, if you wanted to pop them in now, we've got a couple more minutes. Maybe I'll give it, I think there's one more. So there is another one that just came through. So it says, as I understand it, prior to a certain age, they're unable to provide consent and thus not allowed to participate in sexual acts. How is this raised in the text?
Thanks, that's a great question. Obviously, across the country, we have different laws for consent. And when we're speaking in terms of sexuality education, all the research points to the fact that we need to get information in prior to. So even in primary schools, we're teaching students about permission and gaining permission or giving permission. So it's across the board from our 7 to 10 texts. We're talking about how we negotiate, how we talk, how we say no, what to do if someone doesn't say no. There's scenarios, there's activities where they can all be practiced. So regardless of where which state or territory you're in and what the consent laws are, that can be addressed across the board. Yeah, thank you. Good question.
Thank you. If anyone has any other questions, now's the best time to ask. Maybe we'll just give it one more minute just in case there's any last minute questions that come up. But thank you again for joining us tonight. We have samples and Nelson MindTap trials available for this. So if you want to see kind of the scenarios Claire was talking about in action, you can follow the links in the chat to kind of have a look for yourself. But if there aren't any more questions, maybe we'll stop here.
I'll just jump in quickly just to say, again, thank you to Claire. It's always a pleasure hearing from you. And I thought that there were some great resources that you've shared here. I know that some of them are in the Fit for Life series too. So the slide deck will also go around with links to all of those, some really powerful videos there too. I thought one of the staggering statistics was that 84% of students get their information about sexual consent not from a trusted adult, but from other sources. So, you know, as a parent of young girls, I find that staggering as well, and really does challenge us all to kind of be part of that changing the story narrative as well. So really, really powerful messages, and thank you again. Thanks everyone for attending. Yeah, we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you. Thank you again. Good night, everybody.